Okay, so we just get.
We've got 21.
Oh, wow. I'm
Okay,
happy. I don't know how
so
many. Yeah.
thank you so much, everyone, for coming to today's knowledge share, the first, obviously, of 2025, where we welcome Katherine Passerieu to talk about why France is different. But before we start, I just wanted to say a big thank you to today's sponsor of this knowledge share, which is Norstat. Norstat is a European data collection company with large proprietary active online panels in the UK, Ireland, and 17 other countries. As they own the panels, they can profile the audiences their customers want to speak to, as well as provide reassurance about the source of data. So thank you, Norstat, for sponsoring today's session. And we will hand over to Katherine. You may have heard Katherine may be skipping out some of the slides that she has just to stick within the time constraints, but I will be sharing the slides and the recording with everybody afterwards. And the other thing to say, in case you missed it in our chat, is that Lynn Chapman is having internet problems. So please bear with us with that. Hopefully that will be resolved soon. Okay, so over to Katherine.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And Lynn for putting this session together. I'm really excited to be here. Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to see that there are so many people on the Zoom. It's a great way to start the year, certainly for me, and I hope that you will enjoy the presentation. So I have 45 minutes, and I will try to cover everything important, obviously, but I also want to allow time for questions because it's not like a lecture. And I'd like to engage with you and see if you share some of the ideas and things that I'm going to present, and also have your point of view on some aspects that you know, what's important for you, because it's such a vast topic. I could spend days and days talking about it, but we have these time constraints. So I was thinking of maybe 30 minutes of me talking. You can put questions in the chat, and then 15 minutes of questions at the end, if that's okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and start with the heading is, so why is France different? So is France different, and why? So I'm going to talk about differences between France and essentially UK. I know there are people from other countries. I think I've seen that, but it would be also versus Europe in general. But essentially, I focus in UK simply because I live here. I've lived in France, and I have spent time, you know, 30 years working in the UK, doing research in France, and having done research in France as well. So my passion, one of my passions, is really understanding cultural differences, and I see that every day. So that's why, you know, we're here today to look at considerations when you carry out research in France. What are the things that you know, you should be mindful of? So I'm just trying to see why I can't. Okay. So okay, sorry. So yeah, so the structure, this is the structure of the presentation. So there are two parts. First is the background information, so geopolitics, if you want. So I don't want to bore you too much with this aspect, but it's important to keep it in mind because it explains the second part, which is more about the practicalities of conducting a market research in France, the pitfalls and the things to be mindful of. It is interesting, but you will have the deck and you could look at it in your own time because it's quite dense. So really what it is that the first point is that France is kind of unique in terms of having a multifaceted history, culture that have shaped and influenced its politics, its identity, its consumer habits. And it was one of the oldest nations, it is one of the oldest nations on earth. And at some point it was a major power in Europe. I mean, the 20th century have seen that declining. France is different now. There's lots of difficulties at the moment, consider, you know, in the political arena. So things keep changing, and this is a something that you're aware of. And because you're familiar with conducting qualitative research in France, you will see that showing an understanding and a positive understanding, if possible, of these particular values and aspects of French culture and economic factors is quite essential to connect with consumers and get them to open up. So what are these factors that have shaped France and which can help understand French consumers? So I would say, first, regional and ethnic diversity that includes religion. That has changed a lot over the years. So regional is because each region in France has its own traditions, dialect, cuisine, influenced by local geography and history. Ethnic, France has a significant immigrant population, particularly from former colonies. So Africa and Maghreb, the North African countries. And that has created tensions around issues of immigration and cultural identity. One consequence of that immigration is the rise of the Muslim religion in France. There are no statistics on that because we're not allowed to ask the ethnicity question that we have in the UK. That's not allowed in France so far. So we don't know. Some people say Muslim is now the first religion, but I think it's more like the second one. The Catholicism, Christianity has receded, like maybe in most European countries. So it is certainly a trend that Muslim religion and Islamic values are on the rise, and that's a very big trend. I read the statistics saying that among the 18 to 34, I think, population in France who are Muslim, 20% say that the Sharia law should be adopted in France. So that's something that is today, has some consequence. So history. So as I said, France has was a major European power, from absolute monarchy to Napoleon to before that, the French Revolution, 1789, abolition of privileges and ideals of democracy, freedom, national sovereignty, secularism, which is very important because France is a secular country where the state is separated from the church. But with the Muslim now effect, that is a bit sort of changing. So we could say that France was a major power up to the 20th century, although in the 20th century it was influential in constructing Europe. Okay, so now we've got the cultural heritage. So with France being for a long time a cultural center for art, literature, philosophy, cinema, fashion, social structure. So originally, France has had a rigid class structure. Today, it's more fluid. Basically, it's a bit like here with the classe moyenne, middle class, which is not exactly the middle class. It's like moyenne making for, it's the major group of people in France. It's quite diverse, and yeah, and the say upper middle class is concentrated in big cities, Paris, and working class outside Paris, suburbs. So, okay, cultural norm and etiquette. So, I mean, this is important, and help understand why fashion, for example, and things like appearance, personal appearance, beauty, cosmetics, well-being are important in France. Literally, some etiquette rules dates from Marie Antoinette's court, who imposed formality and fashion codes. This is still the case today. So French society is a mixture of tradition and modernity. Geography, so we know from beaches to mountains, France has a very sort of diverse geography, which influences lifestyles and yeah, ways of living. So now I just want to touch very briefly on the aspect of cuisine and gastronomy. France, I mean, food plays a very central role in French culture. So I think to understand France, we always have to bear in mind this kind of polarization. I mean, tradition and modernity. So it's always, tradition is always there. So meaning quality, discernment, and that is very visible in many aspects of French consumer behavior, looking for locally sourced products, organic, gourmet food, etc. So fashion is something also that is rooted in tradition. So it's not so much the fact that French people want to show up or look good or appear. It's just a cultural code. Fashion is rooted in some traditional sort of heritage, and this is why timeless versus trendy, this kind of stuff is still very, very relevant. When you're in France, you notice that there's a dress code and it means something, and then you always have to figure out what it is that it means. So it's not what it's very much, it's quite individualistic, but also there's a kind of conformism and sort of collective subconscious, which people are kind of following as well as their own taste. So I'm going to go quite quickly into all this. So this is the background information. So in terms of the French consumer market, so France is the second largest consumer market after Germany and before UK. So favorite highest sectors are food, drinks, cosmetics, beauty, sport. Sport is interesting because the Olympics in Paris, since the Olympic in Paris, we have seen an enormous step up on sports, and sports has become really a sort of a huge trend in all sorts of aspects, with the government taking a lot of initiatives and people being completely into sports now. The retail sector is significant, with big chains, as you know. Something that struck me when I was in France at Christmas is that the big chains have fresh counters, and they compete directly with the best local shops because they sell locally produced high quality products. So that's another thing, is the local economy is striving. So in parallel to the sort of national economy, each region has its local productions, and sold through individual shops and supermarket chains. So they sell different things in different regions. So internet use one of the highest in Europe. So French people were initially very slow at adopting e-commerce, but online shopping now is very significant. Amazon is booming. People were very reluctant towards Amazon to begin with, but now it's as it is in every other country. And L'Oreal says that about a quarter of their products now, premium, upmarket, the high-end products are sold online. So luxury good is more and more sold online. Yeah, something maybe important is yes, there's some services that are not really have not taken up in France. Say, for example, Deliveroo, you know, this kind of stuff, that food delivery or meal delivery. It's not big trend. But the French have a kind of a balanced lifestyle, so home working. So maybe that is changing. So okay, so this is interesting, but not maybe for now, which shows that the there's less, there's more. I mean, the pyramid, the age pyramid is now totally irrelevant. Remember when the age pyramid, I mean, years, decades ago, I mean, it looked like a pyramid. Now it doesn't look like a pyramid because there are lots and lots of old people, fewer and fewer young people with birth rate declining. Retirement age is 62. I mean, it's been 64 since about, I think, 6 months ago, when, the big debate in French pensions. And I put question mark because a lot of people refuse to admit it's 64. They still want to stay at 62, which was one of the lowest age in Europe. So that means that a lot of French pensioners who are wealthy and spend time enjoying cooking, eating out, etc., going on holiday. So, okay. So yes, so it is, I mean, in a kind of a summary, France is a major consumer market, and as a, France has a social sort of safety net, with a lot of benefits, and the health system is very good, although it's not as good as it was, but it's still good compared to, what it is in other countries. Stable income level, this local economy system, which offer very good value, cheap, for money products, which means that French lifestyle is very comfortable with, less money than maybe in UK. That I would say that's the difference, is that the class moyenne enjoys a comfortable standard of living, although French people will tell you, they will complain and they will say, no, we're struggling, etc. But they're struggling and struggling. And I feel that this is very, very, very much the case, that there's a lot of kind of richness in France that people benefit from. And there's a lot of help, and there's a lot of products on offer and services. So that's the background. So now I just want to touch on this, which is and this is more relevant to market research, that language and communication is important. So the philosophers say, they have brought this to French, like philosophers, intellectuals, etc. And they feel that, it's important to have an opinion, and it's important to verbalize it. And people who've done research in France know that people are very talkative. They prefer to speak French than any other language. However, there are a few things that people don't want to talk about. Money is one, maybe because of the values of the French Republic, with its emphasis on equality. People are very reluctant to talk about money matters outside close family. So anything about inheritance, tax, property prices. It's totally taboo. So yeah, this is what I was touching on before: individualism versus collectivism. So France is very much between the two. You know, some countries are more individualistic, some others are more collectivist. France is between the two because there is a very strong sense of I've got an opinion, I'm entitled to my opinion, I will say it. Okay, I will hear you, but this is what I think. You've seen, you know, market research and consumers being extremely confident, articulate and expressing their opinion as if it was the opinion and no other opinion, you know, matters. On the other hand, there is this kind of culture of that is there with the norm and the etiquette and what you're supposed to say and think. So it's between the two, and communities are important, and peer groups and social class in a way. What is the norm within your group? With you know, it doesn't matter how it's defined, but what is the norm? So in terms of branding, so brand loyalty, emotional connection. So this is something that was always very strong in France. People don't hold back. They talk about their emotions and their feelings a lot, so brands that align with people's values and personal sort of preferences, but personal values really at a deeper level, are, you know, very, very successful. So I would say for market research, you need to the deeper you dig, the better, because then you know what really matters for people, and knowing all the background information, you know, about the history of France, how it has developed, what people value. And if a brand is able to touch on that, so brands who, for example, evoke sort of nostalgia, the past, history, childhood memories, or references to French history or French culture, I mean, they are really winning brands. Like luxury good brands are very good at that. So heritage, history, or the craftsmanship leads to brand loyalty. And the final thing is that word of mouth is very important. So people tend to trust friends, family. Influencers are very big in France, huge influence of influencers now in shaping behavior, purchasing behavior. So it's not that advertising doesn't play a role, but it's not just advertising alone that people will believe and will follow. So to summarize, the psychology of French consumer it shows like a strong cultural attachment to quality, luxury, alongside modern constants for sustainability and individuality. So they will seek products and brands which align with their personal identities, values, and it will be about expressing their personality, their own personality, through choices of brand and products, whilst conforming to strict social norms, codes, and values. Hence why I did that little, you know, the first part on those cultural and historical aspects. So in terms of considerations when doing market research, so I would say nuances or details are very important. And it's really important to understand why people say what they say, because it really very, you know, it will inevitably refer to those aspects that I was talking about before. So all the heritage and the culture, the history. So you and the tradition within families, because the family is very important, and every family in France has its own norms and codes and habits and beliefs, and it's very difficult to go against that. So they're very ingrained, and people will be very, very adamant that this is the truth and this is the way. just because their mother, their aunt, their grandmother said that, did that, that is the truth. So it's important to understand where they're coming from when they're expressing an opinion. And then suddenly, oh, yeah, a bit of a eureka moment for the insight. That's where it comes from. So I understand it. So in terms of communication, I would say polite, formal communication helps. And build up trust and encourages open, honest responses, and obviously showing and understanding and respect. Ideally, that you like French culture would make you be a winner. So in terms of methodologies, I'd say preference for face-to-face methodologies. It's important for, say, sensitive topics. I would absolutely recommend for anything sensitive to do face-to-face. And I know the form now is the same in France. Online is the preferred, easiest method. And whether it's online or in face-to-face, French consumers excel in group discussions. So they're very talkative, as you know, if you've seen some of those groups, passionate, engaged, opinionated, and love debate. For this, going back to this, those philosophers. If you watch French television, it's all about debating. It's all about round tables, debate, and then conflict of ideas. People come across as arguing or being really angry with each other. No, they're just debating. They love nothing more than debating. And not that they change their mind at the end, but they will have expressed their opinion. And there's lots and lots of opinions that they are aware of. So that's why using projective techniques is really good, as well as listening to people, because then you can also add that to, and French people will be very, I'd say, reactive to those things that you do with projective techniques, as stories, pen portraits, etc. And but the thing is that you need time. So, group discussions of less than an hour and a half or 2 hours is the ideal, but I know it's not always possible. But, you get a lot more, because French people tend to talk too much. And so, but you need to, some American clients, it's nothing to do, nothing against American clients, but it's just that they want to get as much as possible in as little time as possible. And they send me texts saying, move on. But I'm sorry, but I haven't got the information. So I move on because I have to, but it's a little bit frustrating, because the French person is going to start with something like looked completely irrelevant, but because it's their way of saying something is to start with something, and you're going to get there. But if you don't have the time, it's a bit of a shame, because you might, just feel the dots, but you might get it wrong. And also be prepared with a lot of analysis, a lot of information to analyze. That's a bit of a downside. So when we cost a project, we tend to put too much money for analysis, and then people say, oh, but you're more expensive than the other countries. Yes, because I know I'm going to get a lot of stuff. Same with the length of the groups or the interview. So it is a balance between, conforming to what people want and also not losing the richness of, what might come up. So in terms of analysis and interpretation, it's quite important to understand the language. So that's why, and I'm going to say that in a couple of slides, it's nearly finished. In translation, translation has to be done by a human being, because the nuances, the way people say things, not so what they say, but also how they say it. What language do they use? Because language is very formal, and it defines a person, the language, not so much the accent like maybe in the UK, but the use of words is so important, and this gives you a lot of clues So that's one thing that we look at, the language and the nuances. The second thing we look at is the broader context. What I said before about the cultural aspect and so on. And so the holistic approach gives you more meaningful insight. So look at absolutely everything, and then you get insight. So in terms of, say, these are more the practicalities. So recruitment requires significant planning. So I'm also, sometimes accused of spending, planning too much time for recruitment, but that's only because we need to know, considering this sort of multifaceted society, it's important to understand exactly what kind of person the client wants to interview. And it could be, is this true for consumer and B2B? And if it's a bit loose and not clear, then we have problems when they see the respondents. It's not exactly what we wanted, but because we hadn't spent enough time defining the target group. So, and I would say trust the recruiter, because they know the market and they know how to recruit the right respondents and the valuable respondents. Incentives are much higher in France than anywhere else. That's because not because people are more motivated by money, but it's because if you want reliable respondents who show up on time and give you the time of day, then you need to give them a lot more money. And that's also kind of a thing that is expected. Yeah, and the translation aspect. So the final aspect is like the general data protection regulation is huge in France. People who worked in France with me or without me, they know that GDPR, droit à l'image, which is something that is very bureaucratic, that your end client has to sign for people to agree to have their image shared, even if it's internal. It's so, recruiters will be very adamant. It's like, you have to sign this, and they don't do selfies, they don't. So this is so something that it's quite difficult to make people understand that this is the French law. People are very compliant to law and government policies that dated Napoleon or whenever, but it is something that it is something very, 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 very important in France. Okay, and then final, I said last but not least. So this is, if you plan research, it's a bit of a minefield. There's so many bank holidays, so much holiday. People have 30 days, holiday per year. And this is a bit of a joke. I got that from a cartoon. It was not saying the pont, which are called the pont, what is that, the bridges. So if it's a weekday, say, of bank holidays on a Monday, where people are given the Monday, or Tuesday, people given the Monday off. So it was a bit of a joke saying, if those ponts, 32 days, that these are the ponts, Easter, and so you put down 5 days out of your 30-day holiday, say you work in a company, and you can get 32 days holiday free. So anyway, so that's a bit of an exaggeration, but planning field work, bearing in mind all those holidays and ponts, is sometimes a bit of a challenge. So okay, so I think that's about, and I have a bit less time for questions than I hoped for, but yeah, I'm going to stop sharing and see what you think.
Hi, Catherine. I have a question for you. It's Ina here.
Hi, Ina.
Hi. Thank you so much. Very clear and nice summary of the French market. I found it really interesting that you described in the beginning that there is an increase in number of people who are Muslim or have a non-Catholic background. And that in combination that people live in all kinds of areas in France and have different lifestyles. Now that a lot of the work is online, have you noticed different respondents in your online groups compared to the, I imagine, face-to-face groups in Paris that you may have done before, or in Lyon, or in wherever?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I would say yes, definitely. Yeah, that is appearing in market research. The French new ethnicity in France. This is kind of showing up in group discussions. Yeah.
And is this something that comes up naturally? Because I'm also thinking of when we talk about diversity and inclusion in the Netherlands, sometimes I recruit specifically to make sure that people are included that aren't, you know, standard white Dutch traditional people, just to make their voices heard. But if in France you can't ask what your ethnicity is, how do you make sure their voices are heard?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's a bit of a nightmare for recruiters because they're asked to, I mean, it is a good question. Recruiters are asked to avoid, you know, sometimes they're asked to avoid people from immigration, and sometimes they're asked to include them and be representative of every walks of life in France, and it is a very, very gray area. And yeah, it is a yeah, that is an issue.
Okay, thank you, Katherine.
Can I jump in here, Katherine, if that's okay?
Yeah.
I think even though we can't ask the ethnicity. By the way, I'm Diana. I'm English.
Hi, Diana. Hi.
Hello, and I live and work in France. Have done.
I know. Yeah.
No, I'm just telling the others because I know, Katherine, you and I have worked together. The ethnicity thing, we can't directly ask the question, but frankly, what our recruiters will often do, if they do want, you know, say people from a Maghreb origin, you can most often tell just by their names, to be honest.
Yeah, very true. I was thinking that. Yeah.
You know, if there's somebody who's Moroccan, they're unlikely to be called Catherine Leclerc. So, you know, that's kind of how they can get those quotas if we want them to.
No, this is true. This is true. I mean, it's interesting, Diane, because you live in Paris, and
yeah.
Did that resonate with you?
Yes, it did, very much so. I think there was one area where I'd like to kind of build on is how you talked about you need a lot of time with French groups. And as you pointed out, they do talk a lot. You have to work a lot harder, I find, with UK or US consumers to stop them going off track, you know, into different areas which are interesting but not necessarily part of your guide. So you have to rein them in a lot. So there is that. And also, Katherine, you said they like to debate, they like to talk, but I feel you also need the extra time because even though they do talk a lot, I think it takes longer with French consumers to really get down to their emotions and really personal feelings. And particularly if you're talking about a kind of sensitive subject like, I don't know, the problems of aging or, you know, I did a few projects a few years ago on female incontinence. It took a lot longer to get French women to openly talk about how they felt about it, how embarrassing it was. Whereas, you know, I've always found that English consumers are as though from the get-go, they're in a room with people that they've known for 10 years. Nothing's off the table. Whereas with French people, it starts a little bit more formal. You know, we're saying vous and not tu, you know, it's very respectful. And so doing the whole warm-up thing to get really honest personal feelings, it takes longer in France.
100%.
They're more emotionally guarded.
More, 100%. But once they get going, they're
Yeah,
very
once they get
strong.
going, it's
But
great.
you're right. You're absolutely right. This is the warm-up bit. And yeah.
Can I jump in as well? Sorry.
No, Anita's got her hand up. Are you still wanting a question, Anita?
No,
Hi there. It wasn't so much. Thank you very much, Catherine. It's really interesting. I'm British but based in Spain for the last 20 years, and it's just I can identify with a lot of what you were saying. We definitely need more time. So the standard in the UK is a 1.5 hour group, and I always recommend to clients a 2 hour group if that's the case, unless it's online. And it's not so much that people are as guarded as it sounds like the French are. They're so talkative and they're opinionated and they're really engaged. And I was just wondering whether you have this issue in France as well, whereby, like, if we get asked by a UK or US research agency to recruit, for example, 18 to 25-year-olds who are working and earning X amount of money, people in that age group, well, basically into their mid to late 20s in Spain, are living in the family home, especially if they're middle, sort of ABC ones. Is that the case in France?
Yeah. I think it's a case. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a case. Yeah. It is.
So it just needs...
with the cost of living and with
Well, I've heard that is beginning to happen in the UK as well. A lot of what you were saying also about the holidays. There's like loads and loads of bank holidays, and the puente, the pont, the bridge. So if it falls on a Thursday, we get the Friday off as well. And I feel almost embarrassed about how many public holidays there are.
Yeah, and I mean, August you can just forget, frankly.
August in Spain you can forget about too. It's just impossible, and it doesn't make any difference having online research. People are in holiday mode, so they're not going to pay any attention to, or be on time or anything. Okay, thank you.
There's some questions in the chat. Alex is asking, do the French like doing interviews on Zoom, or is it all about phone interviews or in person?
No, they love Zoom. They love Zoom. Zoom is not a problem. Zoom has been adopted very, very quickly, and because the trend of working from home and etc., people are used to it. So it's the form now. It's the right way. Although, when you do a face-to-face project, it feels like really refreshing and really nice to see real people talking to you. And I feel, I'm not sure we get a lot more, but the interaction, the human connection is rewarding. But no, and on Zoom, yeah, they talk a lot. I find no difference between making them talk and open up. As Diane said, it takes maybe a bit of time, the introduction and the warm up. But when they get going, I would say maybe it's the same in the UK. I don't like when I have to do like 7 or 8 participants in a group discussion. I prefer when it's like 5.
Yeah.
But it's the same everywhere, because especially the French, if you have 7 or 8, it just takes forever.
One thing I have found, I don't know if you found this, Katherine, is that I agree, the French have no problem doing Zoom, but you need to be a little bit more strict with them on the rules, like not to be taking phone calls, I've had consumers like, they're doing it on their phone, and I can see people like going off and, folding their laundry. And it's like, hello, you're supposed to be listening to me. Oh no, I'm listening. And I'm like, no, clearly you're not, because you haven't said anything in 10 minutes and I can see you folding your laundry. So you have to be very, very strict about, be in a place where you're isolated, where you're not going to be interrupted. Because in many ways, the French don't really like following rules all the time.
Yeah, that is true. Maybe less now that is more established, but at the beginning, I mean, it's the role of the recruiter to explain that actually it's not because on Zoom that it's not serious. And okay, you can be in your pajamas, but I had someone driving, someone who sadly left
Oh yeah, no,
her
that's
house,
terrible.
and she
Yeah.
carried on, you know, being interviewed in her car, and I was like, "Where are you?"
Jeff asks, Catherine, can you share any observations on what you've experienced as trickier target groups to recruit and research in France? That's trickier than they are in the UK. He says he's worked with you on a. He said, remember, we worked together on a multi-country study on architects and installers in the past.
Yeah, because you sound like Lynn, you sound slightly you broke up a little bit when you talked. I didn't understand.
Okay. He's asking about the difference between trickier targets in France and the UK.
Trickier targets. You mean people who are difficult to recruit?
Jeff, do you want to jump in? It's your question.
Yeah, maybe you could explain what you mean by tricky, or
yeah. Hi, Catherine. Thank you very much. The question was just really, because you work in both countries, you might be able to give some help to us to say, hey, look, certain types of business audience or certain types of consumer are more difficult in France. So watch out if you're wanting to do one example. Someone said 18 to 25s, but maybe when we worked on architects seemed much easier in France than Germany and the UK, but installers more difficult. So it's just that type of, things that you've observed from working across the two countries. What's trickier in France? Where do you think there's some sticky target groups as a guide? It's not a trick question, just
that's a good question. I'm trying to think of difficulties that I have encountered. I mean, I don't know if it's specific to France, but I guess I don't know if it would be specific to France, but obviously the busier people are, or the I don't think there are any targets that are particularly difficult if you given the time, if you have enough time to recruit. I find what is difficult for me in B2B. B2C is fine, but B2B, I find that the screener, I always now, my New Year resolution is really to have a briefing on the screener by the client or even the end client, because spending time on a screener is essential. Sending a screener to a recruiter thinking that she's going to be fine, that doesn't work. And asking questions, what do you mean by this job description? Because job descriptions are not the same in France as in UK or America. And what do you mean by that job title? What do you mean by that job description or area of responsibility? Because it's different in France, and job titles are not the same, and responsibilities are not the same. Say I did a project, for example, we had to recruit the sustainability director or the person in charge of sustainability in, say, things like Google, or for cloud, etc. I mean, there is such a role, but sometimes it falls into finance, or it could fall into IT or logistics, or it's what do you want to interview and why. And this is when it becomes difficult, when people assume that they're going to find the same categories in France as they are defined in other countries or in their own country, and because the French companies are not structured in the same way. See what I mean? So this, as long as we are very clear and spend a lot of time up front with the screener, we'll be fine.
Okay, are there any more questions? If not, then I'd like to say a big thank you to Katherine for sharing her insights. I found it fascinating. I'm glad I'm not a French recruiter. That's all I can say. And
Yeah.
thank you all for attending. And the recording of this will be available in due course. And thank you to Lucy for helping out when my tech went wrong. Thank you again and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Once Carol rated her, please leave a message.